Ah. When the new executive committee members joined our leadership last month, we held an election for officers, and there was a peaceful transition of power. I'm pleased to tell you that we have a new chair and a new vice chair. Ann Brown is our vice chair, and Jason Frenzel is our new chair. And Jason's here, and I would like to give him the opportunity to tell us a few words.
Thanks, Dan. Honored to be here amongst such amazing folks. I'm getting some feedback. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, maybe if people can mute, that would be good.
I just wanted to thank Dan for his ongoing strength as our programs chair. He's bringing amazing things to us every single month, including this presentation, and has bridged to a new scenario where we're going to be cross-promoting programs with our other strong Sierra Club groups throughout the state. And to look to our website to find other virtual engagement that you can have with us and our other Sierra Club groups nearby. Also, if you are looking for ways to engage with us, we're always, as Dan noted, looking for new members, but we're excited about our outings group starting to get up and running again after COVID here in a month or two. So if you like going for hikes in the woods, make sure you sign up for our events, which you can do through Jamie or through our website. Thanks for having me, Dan. I always appreciate it, and looking forward to the presentation. Thanks all.
You got to unmute.
Thank you. I don't think Ann is here. Are you here, Ann? We'll get her to introduce herself next time. She's actually a very faithful attender of these meetings. Okay. So something really cool about this is that Jason is a former member of the Ann Arbor City Council, and Ann is a former Ypsilanti City Council member. Their current day jobs are Jason's a volunteer coordinator for the Huron River Watershed Council, and Ann is a staff member for environmental hero and U.S. Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. So we have new leaders that are very savvy about environmental issues locally, regionally, nationally. Hopefully in future elections we can get even more diverse representation, including from Monroe and Lenawee counties. So as Jason alluded to, we're working with 3 other Sierra Club groups to coordinate publicity for our online programs. Our neighbors to the north, the Crossroads group, have all kinds of good programs, including one tomorrow night. Is there anyone here from Crossroads that wants to speak about that? Going once, going. Well, their program tomorrow night is called Green Investing, and it's tomorrow night at 7. And you can get the information on their website or on our meetup site. I'll put both of those links on the chat once the presentation starts. Is there anybody from the Southeast group here or the Nipissing group?
Yeah, I'm here from the Nipissing group, and so's Ursus.
Awesome. Anything you want to tell us?
Well, we're glad that this was announced by Mike Booza. Of course, the Flint water issues don't really want to use the term near and dear to us, but they're something that's on our minds all the time. And so we're looking forward to this presentation and update. Thank you.
Well, thanks. We're so glad you joined us.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. So Crossroads is also presenting a series of programs by the Howell Nature Center about wildlife. And those are going to be on Wednesday, February 24th, Wednesday, March 10th, Wednesday, March 31st, and Wednesday, April 7th. And again, you can get to those from either our meetup site or from their website. In other news, In other news, I want to share with you that the Huron Valley Group, like many other nonprofits, operated at a loss last year. You should expect to hear about some fundraising efforts over the next few months. Hopefully they'll be fun and painless. I'll have more about this next month. Our budget is very small, but continuing to operate at a loss is unsustainable. We have a group meeting to develop various ways to set us back to a sustainable path. I'm part of that group, and if you have any suggestions or you want to participate, I would love to hear from you. Meanwhile, Shop for the Earth remains our biggest fundraiser, and you can find details at our website. And I'll put that link in the chat too. We like to share wins with you at every meeting. Since our last meeting, we have a new president and vice president who are environmentalists. The Sierra Club nationally and locally worked hard to elect President Biden and Vice President Harris. Let's note that the new president kept his promise to re-enter our nation into the Paris Climate Accord on his first day in office, and also canceled the permit for the XL pipeline as well. Biden and Harris's prospects for enacting strong environmental legislation are strengthened by the election of 2 Georgia environmentalist candidates to the U.S. Senate, which gives us an environmental majority there. So better times are ahead. This is the part of the meeting where I usually ask you to get up and introduce yourselves to someone you don't know. Since we can't do it in person, are there a couple people that would just like to chime in and introduce yourself and tell us why you tuned in tonight?
Hey everyone, my name is Kristen Totten. I'm an education attorney at ACLU of Michigan, and I represented the children of Flint in the Flint Water Crisis, and I'm a big fan of Melissa Mays and Michael Steinberg, so that's why I'm here.
Wow. Hooray for
Kristen,
you.
we may want you to say a few words about the special education settlement if you're going to be around.
Sure, I'm happy to help however you need me to, Michael.
Maybe at the end. Thanks.
Okay. Uh-huh.
That's wonderful. Somebody else want to tell us about yourself and why you came tonight? Versus, why don't you say a word about yourself since you're from
Okay. Well, I joined the Nipissing group about a year ago, and I was interested. I do their social media, and I thought it would be something of interest to come to this meeting and find out more about the Flint Water Crisis because it's so large and so big that any information could help, to other people.
That's
Be more
awesome.
informative.
Thank you for coming tonight. All right. And I want to tell you about our next program, and then we'll get into this one. Next month's program is called Backyard Birds. It's presented by Lee Burton, and he's the chair of the Crossroads Group, which is Livingston County, our neighbors to the north and to the south of you, Nipissing. This program is particularly close to my heart because I love birds. And here's what Lee says about his program. In our area, with the right kind of feeders, as many as 30 species or more could show up over the course of a year. At this program, you will learn about our backyard birds, their songs, what to feed them, and how to attract them. You'll even get a few tips about keeping squirrels from hogging all the food. And the program is suitable for the whole family. And that program will be at this same link and same time, Tuesday, March 16th, 7:30 to 9 p.m. So don't miss it. All right. This month's program is an update about the Flint Water Crisis. And we have Mike Steinberg, who is a law professor at the University of Michigan and formerly the head of the Michigan ACLU. And we also have Melissa Mays, and she is a Flint mom and water activist. And I hope I'm going to say this right. Her group is called What Are We Fighting For? So I'm going to turn it over to them right now. Go get them.
Well, thank you, Dan, for inviting us. I think I'm going to speak first. and lead up to the star of the show, who is Melissa Mays. As Dan said, I am currently a law professor at the University of Michigan Law School. I run a clinic called the Civil Rights Litigation Initiative, and I work with the next generation of civil rights and civil liberties lawyers. In fact, we have something going on in Chelsea right now. I don't know if you've been following the Black Lives Matter protesters and the charges that they've are being prosecuted for. The city council is voting tonight, so I'm going to miss that, but I'm very happy to be here with you. The city council will hopefully vote to dismiss the charges. Before that, I was not the head of the ACLU of Michigan. I was merely the legal director, but that's very much part of my identity. I was the legal director for 22 years, and I had the pleasure to work with people like Kristen Totten and 25 amazing lawyers and lobbyists and field organizers and communication staff. So it's still very close to my heart. You may be wondering how the ACLU got involved in the Flint Water Crisis. We're not an environmental group traditionally, it's an interesting story, and I'm going to tell you how we got involved and what we worked on to replace the lead and galvanized steel pipes, the lawsuit that we brought with Melissa Mays and concerned pastors for social justice. And then we're going to have Melissa, who was a client in that case, talk a little bit about her situation. She's also one of the class representatives in the class action before Judge Judith Levy here in Ann Arbor to recover damages for the case. And I think she'll probably want to say a little bit about the criminal charges that have been brought up. And if we have some time, I'd love to have Kristen Totten talk about the special education case in Flint too that the ACLU brought. The reason the ACLU got involved in this case was initially because of the emergency management law. As you all remember, when Governor Snyder came into office, he passed one of the most radical laws in the country that gave the state the ability to go in and supplant the locally elected government. There used to be such a thing called the Emergency Financial Management Law, and under that, there were means by which the state government could help control the finances. But the emergency manager law allowed state-appointed officials to go in and take over everything. They could do anything. They could pass ordinances. They could violate collective bargaining agreements. They could sell land. They could sell assets. And there was nothing that the elected officials or the people of these cities could do. And the cities that came under emergency management were kind of pushed over the edge because at the same time they passed this emergency manager law, they cut funding to local governments. And so what you had was largely predominantly black cities that lost the ability to control what their local government did. And that included Flint, Detroit, Pontiac, Saginaw, Muskegon, Benton Harbor. At one point, more than half of the Black residents of Michigan did not have control of the local government. They lived in cities that was controlled by the state. And so we challenged that in court. We brought an equal protection challenge and a voting rights challenge, and that was kind of a long shot, and we ended up losing that. And then we thought, well, we should draw attention to the injustice happening in these cities where people have been stripped of their democracy. And the ACLU of Michigan hired the first investigative reporter of any state affiliate of the ACLU. His name's Kurt Guyette. And he went to places like Flint, and he started to observe what was happening. What was happening in Flint was up to the point where Governor Snyder came into office, they received their water from Lake Huron through a pipeline that was run by the city of Detroit. And it was very good water, and it worked for a long time. It was very expensive, though, and so they were looking for ways to cut corners. And they approved the building of the Karagandhi pipeline, which also went from Lake Huron. But that was going to take a while. And so to save money in the interim, before the Karagandhi pipeline was built, they decided to switch from Detroit water, from Lake Huron, to Flint, the Flint River. And the Flint River, of course, had been the dumping ground for GM for many, many years. It was very corrosive, very polluted, and the major problem with what they did is when they switched to the Flint River, they could have controlled, they could have added phosphates and other chemicals to make it less corrosive, but they didn't do that. It would have cost only $5 million to do so, but they didn't. And so what you had, of course, was this very corrosive Flint River eating away at the pipes. And I'm going to try, we used to use BlueJeans, we moved to Zoom, but I am going to try to share my screen and show you a little bit. Whoops. Can you see it, everybody? Yeah, okay. I'm going to play a little clip, and since Melissa won't be able to appear in person, she's having trouble with her screen, I'm going to show a little clip of her. This was a documentary that the ACLU did that won many awards. It's called Here to Flint. If you want to see the whole thing, it's only 45 minutes. And it's really the premier story of what happened. But I'm going to play a little clip, and hopefully you can hear it. Can you hear it?
Are we supposed to hear anything?
Yes.
I don't hear anything.
Okay, I will narrate it a little bit. This was, they switched to Flint, the Flint River. Well, forget this. I became very proficient with Zoom, but not BlueJeans. I apologize.
Does anyone know when you share in BlueJeans, is there a thing like in Zoom where you have to say share your sound?
Here we go. I'm going to try again. Can you hear now?
I'm not sure it's on yet.
Bad, smelled bad,
Yep.
and tasted bad.
And it's just been one debacle after another. We've had 3 or 4 boil water advisories.
My family broke out in a rash that we were told looks like scabies, but it wasn't scabies.
The rashes, the hair loss, the muscle stiffness, the soreness.
For instance, right now, we don't baptize. If we baptize, we have to go outside of the city of Flint.
It's almost like we're living in a nightmare.
While Flint residents were forced to continue to drink the river water, General Motors was allowed to switch back to the Detroit system because the highly...
Yeah. So that's just a little taste of the movie. If you want to see it, I highly recommend it. So while Flint residents were forced to drink this this brown and yellow and red and rusty water, General Motors, who had a plant there, decided that they could no longer use the Flint River water because it was corroding their parts. And so they got permission to go back to the Flint water, the Detroit water. But the residents of Flint were told, don't worry about it. You're being hysterical. You're going to be okay. Just drink the water. Well, eventually, Kurt Guyette, our investigative reporter, got wind that somebody had their water tested, and it was very high in lead. And he came to me, and he said, we got to do something about it. And I said, okay. I had never brought an environmental case before. And as you all know, it's very specialized. So what I did is I reached out to the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. And I had a former intern that was there, and I talked with people all the way up, and I said, you got to come out here. There's something wrong. We think the city of Flint is being fed lead-laced water. And eventually, after much persuasion, they did come, and we did further testing, and we brought a lawsuit under the Safe Drinking Water Act. The state fought us left and right, up and down. They brought out the big guns. They insisted that there was nothing wrong. We went into court. We got a preliminary injunction. We required that they provide water, bottled water, for quite some time. We had them institute various health programs, and they still continued to fight us. They went up to the Sixth Circuit and back. We won there, and then we finally entered into a settlement agreement after lengthy settlement discussions, about a week's worth. It was right during the Muslim ban. I was getting text messages left and right, and I said, "What's going on?" Well, there's a ban on people from Muslim majority countries from coming in, and he said, well, I got to worry about that later. And we eventually settled the case for $97 million. It was a landmark settlement under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Nothing of its type had ever happened before. And there was an agreement to replace all the lead and galvanized steel pipes within 3 years. Institute various health programs, provide bottled water for people that needed it for a period of time, and it's largely been successful. I spoke with somebody from NRDC today. Not all the pipes have been replaced, but about 85 to 90 percent have been, and they haven't done it willingly. There have to be motions to enforce the settlement agreement over and over, but it's largely been a very successful suit. I just want to say, in closing, that the human impact of this case is just heartbreaking. And I remember the ACLU was a plaintiff in this case, and we had to talk to various ACLU members about the impact that it had on them. And I remember meeting with this one woman on a February night. We met in a restaurant, did not drink the water, but she had young kids, and she fed the kids formula. And she was very hesitant to talk about that, but I said, did you feed her water from the Flint River? And she said yes. And I asked her, I felt bad doing this, but I had to do it for the case. I said, how did it make you feel? And she just broke down crying and crying and crying, inconsolable. And she said that she felt responsible for poisoning her own infant. And it was, I'll never forget that day, but there's countless stories like that. I'd like to say that Flint is Exhibit A for what happens when the government strips elected people of their right to elect elected people of their ability to govern, and installs bean counters instead. The toll, human toll, financial toll, the moral toll is beyond belief, and among other things, we need to repeal the Emergency Manager Act. I'm going to stop there and hand it over to Melissa. She was in that clip for a brief second. I'm sorry you're not going to be able to see her, but I asked her to speak because not only is it important to have somebody who was affected by the human-made catastrophe, but she knows a lot more about what's going on there than I do now. And I think in the news now is the class action settlement to try to make whole, that's the idea, individuals who have suffered, and I'm sure she has something to say about the criminal case as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Melissa.
Thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, I have a few things to say, but if you know me at all, if you've ever heard me, I never have nothing to say. Let's put it that way. Today is day 2,489 since Flint has had clean, safe, and of course affordable water, because the state, former Governor Snyder and his appointed emergency managers decided to switch our water source from Detroit, which had been safe and wonderful for 50 years, over to the Flint River as an interim while the Karagandhi Water Authority, or KWA, gets built. And it wasn't to save money. It, as time's gone on, as the investigations have proven, it was to privatize our water, which is something that should strike all of us. We've been fighting Nestle for quite some time. Privatization is the gateway to more Flints. And then, of course, going hand in hand with that is the emergency manager law, who, basically the governor appointed an unelected person to veto and override our local officials. So when our water was switched April 25th of 2014, and less than a month later, people were complaining about discolored water, hair loss, terrible smells, that kind of stuff. They would complain to their local elected officials, their city council person, their mayor. Didn't matter. Did not matter because it went nowhere after that, because our elected officials had had their power stripped. And even in March of 2015, when things were coming to a head and the city council had voted unanimously to get off of the Flint River and go back to Detroit, the former Governor Snyder and his emergency manager, Gerald Ambrose, said that it was inconceivable. It was too much money and we were staying right where we were on the Flint River. And that's how it worked, because that's the power of the emergency manager law, which is on the books in one form or another in 37 states. So when I travel, or now virtually, speak to people in groups all over North America, I like to remind them that there's 37 states that have a law on the books that can be tweaked to suspend their local democracy to fix what, of course, they play off as a financial emergency. But what it is to grab a hold of that last asset, that last gold, which is our water. And when I talk about affordability, Flint pays 8 times the national average. We pay the highest rates in the United States for water that is still harming us. For example, obviously, I was poisoned by the water, as was my whole family. I have 3 sons and a husband. And we, like everyone else, drank the water. Our water was clear, because we thought, okay, like the media had said and the city and state had said, that the people that were receiving brown and orange water, well, it was just their pipes in their homes. It's just their pipes. What they didn't tell us is that the clear water we were drinking was far more dangerous, because lead, certain bacteria, certain carcinogens like total trihalomethanes have no color, taste, or odor. So while we were thinking that we were safe with clear water, no, we were not. So I have a compromised immune system, a seizure disorder that is not epilepsy, but it's caused by heavy metals stored in my brain, signal abnormalities in my brain. I have an autoimmune disorder where my body likes to attack itself for fun. Let's see, my kids have all had to go to physical therapy for growth disorders, endocrine disorders, ADD, which is very common now, children all across Flint. And Kristen Totten can talk about this a little bit more, who's awesome. Her and Mike are both amazing. And that fought to get the Neurodevelopmental Center of Excellence open so we can actually, have our children fully assessed to see what the impacts may or may not be, but also where they're struggling and where, we need the resources, because Flint is still woefully underfunded in all areas. So what has happened is that we've had to sue for every single thing. I started What Are You Fighting For in January of 2015, when we received a notice that for the previous 9 months, our water had been contaminated with a cancer-causing byproduct, which is a disinfection byproduct caused by too much chlorine in the water. And they were overdosing the chlorine because we had already had bacterial issues. So in order to fix one problem, they went ahead and threw in chemicals, which, I'm sorry, no chemical problem is ever corrected with more chemicals. So here people are getting sick, getting cancer, hair falling out, bone pain, muscle pain, passing out in the showers, miscarriages, fetal deaths. I mean, it's just absurd. And you never realize how deadly water can be until it's treated improperly, and how many aspects of your life it impacts. I gave a TED Talk a couple years back where I asked people to raise their hands if they had taken a shower that day or bath, and if to raise their hands if they'd brushed their teeth using tap water, if they had made ice or coffee or fed water to their pets, and then pointed out the fact that do any of you know what's in your water? When was the last time any of you have had your water independently tested? Because that was another thing. We were finding out that the state had been cheating and lying about the lead tests. They weren't even testing for bacteria, and they were hiding that there was E. coli. Now we have a lot of people in Flint who have developed H. pylori. And I had polyps removed from my stomach because during this time I was working out, going to the gym 4 to 5 days a week, working with a nutritionist. So that way my sleeve full of tattoos would look awesome with my muscles. And ended up drinking 1 gallon to 1.5 gallons of tap water a day, because why would I pay for bottled water? That's just a waste of money, right? And so, and while trying to be healthy, same thing with cooking at home. I gave my children, lead-laced spaghetti. And it wasn't just lead. It's lead, aluminum, tin, chromium, copper, all of the things that we've used for drinking water materials throughout the entire system for decades upon decades. And of course, out of sight, out of mind. If the water main is not rupturing into the street, you don't think about it. Like how I was leading up to 2014, I said, I'm a consumer. I pay the highest water rates in the United States. I pay my water bill. I pay my taxes. everything should be fine, right? Well, of course, we all know that that's wrong. Some of us found out the hard way and are working very hard to ensure no one else does. So January of 2015, I started going to protests. I started talking to people, started doing a bootleg epidemiological study where we went around talking to different people at different parts of town to find out it wasn't just one section of town. It wasn't just one house. And people were getting sick. And there were same yet slightly different illnesses to different people across the city. Did not matter their age, race, gender, or income, which was funny. I had been removed several times from the area that they call Miller Road Mansions because we felt that if we could get some of the wealthy folks in Flint, and yes, they do exist, to, side with us and find out their water is also as bad as ours, that maybe we could make some headway. And that's what happened. We were able to get and test one person's home, and she had a very expensive saltwater pool installed, and her motor kept burning out because of heavy metals, and found out just how bad her water was. And so then when people realized your wallet, your bank account doesn't protect you from being piped, water being piped in if you don't know it's bad, that seemed to help. So we went and did as many interviews as possible. We went to court and filed an emergency injunction to get off the Flint River, which of course failed because the state and city came out and said that we didn't know what we were talking about. The water was just fine, and we were fighting because of bacteria. February of 2015, I had connected with Erin Brockovich, and she had connected us with Bob Bocock, who taught us basically everything we know about the water science. And he warned us to test for lead and copper. He said the orange and brown water that's iron. And he said that's a sign of corrosion. But iron doesn't travel alone. So we needed to look for the ones without color or taste, because those are the more damaging neurotoxins like lead. So we started testing the water, and we started testing people all over, finding high levels of lead all over. So it was lead, bacteria, carcinogens, and we still have the same problem. And the reason that I know this is besides our lead tests still showing high, even after getting our service lines replaced, and of course not all of them. We had to go back, we had to go to court back in October to continue to enforce the settlement agreement for the Safe Drinking Water Act case that Michael talked about. We had also tried to get us off the Flint River repeatedly over and over again. We tried suing. We tried, bringing in independent testers. We had brought in Virginia Tech. We had brought in actually Mark Ruffalo's group. So we had people from all over testing for all these different contaminants and showing we had high levels of chloroform in our water, which is a disinfection byproduct. And that's not something you'd want to shower with. And so we did all these, it's nonstop, and we're still working on it. In March, when it hit that COVID was here and it wasn't going well, we got loud. We started screaming. We have 100,000 plus immune suppressed, altered, compromised people here in Flint. What's going to happen when this deadly virus hits us? Well, of course, we found out later. It had already been hitting us. I found out that in February, the pneumonia I had was not pneumonia, February of 2020. And here I am almost a year later, still going through the long hauler effects because guess what? Didn't have that immune system strong enough to be able to protect me because poison water. So in January of this year, I had a cardiac monitor, event monitor implanted in my chest. And so they can figure out what's going on with the tachycardia and bradycardia. Basically, my heart goes too fast, too slow for no reason. They're trying to find a pattern. Well, while showering a few days after my surgery, the waterproof bandage slipped and it burned. I mean, if you get a paper cut and you wash your hands in our Flint water, I mean, it feels like lemon juice. So I thought, oh my God, now I've got chemicals on this. Great. Turns out bacteria. So I had to go in and have surgery again to have a chunk of my skin cut out. So now it looks like I have a bullet hole, which I guess is a much cooler story than basically a wireless remote heart monitor. So I am still dealing with a bacterial infection from that because we have multiple types of antibiotic resistant bacteria in our water. Now, all of this sounds horrible, and it is, because we're still living with this. We're still living bottle to bottle, except we're buying bottled water for the most part, most of us. And we're making companies like Nestle, although we go out of our way to make sure we don't buy Nestle, but we're making some bottled water companies wealthy when all we have asked for was that all of the infrastructure and the appliances and the fixtures in our homes be replaced. And basically, the state fixed what they broke. Obviously, they didn't volunteer to do that, so we went to court with the Safe Drinking Water Act case, and we were in court for a year and a half, 2 months of mediation, and we finally came to March 28th of 2017. We finally settled. course, it's been an ongoing legal battle, as Michael had said before, because they still didn't want to do anything they were supposed to do. During the same time, we also knew that the Safe Drinking Water Act only covers the service line. Now, we did make history because we got the property owner's side replaced as well, because I had come up with an argument. And the reason these lawsuits are successful is because these attorneys, the ACLU of Michigan and NRDC, worked with us and listened to us. We were partners in this lawsuit. So one of the things I had told them was that I had asked if I could remove the water meter and take it with me, and the city told me no. I said, so it's not my property, so why should anything beyond the water meter be my property? And it actually worked in court. So we were able to get the service line from the distribution main in the street all the way up to the water meter replaced. Now, it does not touch the distribution mains, and it does not touch the interior plumbing, appliances, dishwashers. We've gone through 4 water heaters now this year, and 3 dishwashers, 2 washing machines, because the water just basically ate it because it was so corrosive and just a wreck. So we are suing for the civil cases, and we made history once again, because same thing with the Safe Drinking Water Act case. There's no case that had been won by residents of a city suing a government and winning. And the same thing with our class action lawsuit, because we happen to have some amazing lawyers right here in Michigan, Pitt McGee, we have Julie Hurwitz, Bill Goodwin, all of these amazing attorneys, especially they are constitutional rights attorneys. We were able to plow through governmental immunity because we were able to prove that the city and state have violated our constitutional rights to bodily integrity. Basically, you have no right to send poison into my home. And so the only thing that, of course, cuts through governmental immunity is the Constitution. So here we've made history. It's not for a lack of fighting, because again, we filed in January of 2016, and we've gone through 15 appeals all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I was happy that, RBG got to see Mays v. Snyder. So I was like, yay. And and they kicked it out, saying we're not even going to listen to it. And so now the state, the city, and Rowe Engineering and McLaren Hospital have decided to settle for the $642 million. In no way, shape, or form is that enough. If you look at the just $642 million divided by 100,000 people, no. But the thing is that it's a start, and it's a good start, because we still got Veolia, land, and the EPA/federal government out there. So while there are obviously issues, and there's going to be with every settlement, and we're dealing with it, we're fighting with it. There's a fairness hearing coming up in July, so the residents of Flint can actually tell the judge, what they object to, what they approve of, and all that. There's a lot that still needs to be done. We need money to fix our house so we can live safely in our homes. Or for the people who choose to move, they can do the same. I refuse to move because I didn't do this to my house. I didn't do this to my body. I didn't do this to my children, even though I have something called mother guilt that Michael had talked about. Because yes, instead of giving my kids pop, I gave them, clear, sparkling, tap water that they were lying to our face about, and that my kids have to live with this damage for the rest of their lives. And because I have boys, they're able to pass their lead poisoning down, and it can reach 3 generations through their bones. So it's quite wonderful. It is quite terrible. So the thing is to let people know that Flint's made history. We never stopped fighting. We're not asking for something for free, but we're asking that we get fixed properly, because if we don't, after all of these years of, media coverage, lawsuits, the congressional hearings, the failed criminal charges, which is another issue I'll speak about. All of these things, if we don't get fixed properly, the next city is not going to get fixed properly as well. It's going to be a lot easier to sweep these environmental injustices and this environmental racism under the rug and just walk away. So that's why we don't stop fighting here in Flint. And also, I tell people that why would I move? Because I've traveled all over this country, and I wouldn't know where to go that doesn't already have water problems, or they have terrible laws on the books that's going to make them become a Flint, or they're already on their way. So that's another thing too. And just asking people, okay, what's in your water? And I've traveled all over. I went to Denver, where they said they had some of the best water, the best water treatment, and I could smell the bleach smell, which I know is not bleach, that's TTHM. So something's going on, so we've got these noses now. We're like, no, thank you. So most of us, you're not going to catch us drinking tap water ever, because we've learned a lesson. It's not because we're afraid. It's because we learned that, there's a lot of contaminants out there you can't see, smell, or taste, so why should I run the risk of being repoisoned? So there's a lot of that going on. There's people that still are not sitting in jail for doing this because this was not an accident. It was not people in a water treatment plant who didn't know what they were doing. These choices were made. The choices to cover it up were also made. And now more and more is coming out with the different investigations and investigative journalism. There's a great Vice story, and there's another story that just came out showing what Snyder knew and when he knew it. And so then, of course, you see the criminal charges, and he's basically getting slapped with $1,000 misdemeanor, which is about 1 penny per person he poisoned. So it doesn't give us a lot of hope that there's going to be justice. There are other people that are getting charged with much heftier charges, which is proper. But then again, we've gone through hell with that as well. Things were going well with Todd Flood's team, who was the previous special investigator who was appointed by Schuette. And yes, with Schuette in office, not a lot of us had a lot of hope that it was going to go anywhere, at least up to Snyder, but we knew how these things worked. And Todd Flood and his team had come to Flint. And again, when you involve Flint residents, 1, you're going to get more information. 2, you're going to get support. And 3, we help keep you on track. This is about us and our lives, and we are the living experts because we've been through this since day one. And the one thing you can do, I'm also operations manager at Flint Rising, and we formed as a coalition of different water groups to be able to go canvass door to door to make sure everybody had the proper information, which of course they didn't. There's 26 languages spoken in Flint, and the only thing that was printed was in English. The state tried doing Spanish and used Google Translate. It was a disaster. We had people boiling the water because, in certain countries, from the South, that's what you do if you have bad water. Well, boiling water releases those carcinogenic byproducts into the air, but then also it condenses the metals that are in the water. So there was a lot to do. But one of the coolest things is I was canvassing, and we actually had Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! With us, and we went to a house. They welcomed us in and said that they had recognized me from the news. And there's 3 or 5 little old ladies that are sitting around the table, and I asked them if they had the information they needed, if they had bottled water, if they had filters, if they needed help with anything. And they were saying that, they know it's not just about lead, and they started going in about bacteria, chlorine, and copper. And I couldn't have been more proud. These 5 little ladies were not sitting there just talking about grandkids, and they weren't just playing cards, which they were, and it seemed like a pretty brutal game that they had going. But they were talking about the laws surrounding our water and how weak they are, how outdated they are, because, of course, the Safe Drinking Water Act, lead and copper rule are absolutely absurdly outdated. But they were able to say, we know better. We know they're lying to us because we know that the filters don't reduce copper, and we know that there's not enough chlorine in the water to kill this bacteria. And that made me super proud. And so, yeah, if you want to know about the Flint Water Crisis, talk to people from Flint, because people from the outside, they're not going to have, they're going to have what the media put out, or, if they're not involved, the ACLU of Michigan, of course, NRDC, they're very involved. They pretty much live with us, and they're part of the family because of how long these cases have gone on and how hard we've worked together. But for the most part, there are a lot of groups in Flint that are happy to educate you. But yeah, it's a crisis of environmental racism. It's a crisis of an attack on poverty and and the poor, and it's an attack on our environment in general and how they can just contaminate it and walk away. General Motors was ordered by the EPA years ago to clean up the Flint River and never did. They filed bankruptcy and walked away from it, and here we go. We got to drink it. So, and of course we found out recently that there was toxic waste and fracking waste dumped in the Flint River while we were drinking it, and nobody bothered to, let us know until this year. So it's been an ongoing slap in the face and pointing out how unimportant the environment is and human lives are, but that's what we have to do. We have to work together to change this. I was asked to testify in front of Congress, and they apologized to me. The congressional reps apologized because the lead and copper rule is so outdated and Safe Drinking Water Act is so outdated because both parties can't agree on anything. They said the Republicans want to get rid of it and the Democrats want to tighten it, and there's no in between. So we have to do something about this because unlike Europe, we have zero bathing and showering standards, which is how most people get their exposure to water. So we have a lot of work to do, and we're happy to join with anybody who's willing to stand with us and fight with us. But there's a lot of areas that need to be addressed. Privatization, water rights, water affordability. We've been fighting since the beginning of the COVID crisis about the water shutoffs, and people are still without running water. So there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot going on in the courts, because that is one thing you have to do with a crisis this big is you have to fight in the streets, in the courts, at the ballot boxes, and in legislation. Legislature is how you're going to make permanent change. So that's something that we've been very proud. We've been able to help fight for the strongest lead and copper rule in the country. Still not good enough, but it's a good start. And we've been making changes and hopefully proving that it's a crime and a very expensive one to poison people and cover it up and try to get away with it because you look at the community as a disposable people. So if you have any questions, just let me know. And thanks for having me.
Dan, do you think it would be okay to have Kristen speak for a little bit about this?
We would love that.
Okay.
All right. What's our time situation, though? I want to be mindful of that.
Well, talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we can have some question and answers, and then we'll wrap up.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Dan. And thanks, Mike. And Melissa, it's great to be here. So Melissa and Mike just gave you a great background as to how we got into the Flint Water Crisis. And I'm an education attorney. So when I was in my kitchen in Kalamazoo and started hearing about what was happening up in Flint, I would say it was about early October 2014, 2015 was when the NPR and Michigan Public Radio started really talking about it more. And it wasn't until the EPA memo was leaked by Kurt Guyette, our investigative journalist, back in July of 2015, that things really started to hit the fan. And then you had Dr. Mona do her test about the blood lead levels of the kids in Flint, and her results came out in September of 2015. And I just knew, as a parent and also as an education attorney, like lead and children just don't mix, and it can cause behavioral challenges. It can cause learning challenges. And so I was very excited that the ACLU of Michigan wanted to get in there and be able to help the families, to hear their stories, listen to the families who were going to the school and saying, look, my child's anger management issues have gone from 0 to 60 like in 2 seconds flat, and there's really no time for pause or reflection, and that's not my child. That's not the way my child has been, and they've been drinking the water for over 18 months. And so that's what lead can do, but it becomes an invisible disability once it's absorbed by the body. And it's only in the blood for about 20 to 30 days, and then it nestles into the bones, the tissues, as Melissa was talking about what she and her family have gone through. And it also goes into the brains. That's where we needed to establish a neuropsychological center so we could really see the level of damage. And it was so nefarious, the lead and what was happening, that in October of 2015, there was outrage about when the government finally said, okay, actually, Dr. Mona was right, and this is lead, stop drinking the water, that there was outrage about, let's test the schools. And the former governor said, well, we don't have to. And under the Safe Water Drinking Act, he was right. They didn't have to. It didn't require it under the lead and copper rule. So they didn't have to do it. And thankfully, the public outcry was enough that they did test the schools. But what we found there was one school, the special education school, actually had over 2,000 parts per billion in one of their drinking faucets. All of them were well over the 15, which is the federal action level, and that's not a public health standard. There's 0 is the public health standard as to what is safe. So it was in the schools and have been pouring in, and the kids have been absorbing it not only at home but also in the schools and just not knowing about it. And so we brought a lawsuit saying, hey, under the law, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, you have to find the kids that are struggling. And what the school district was doing, the Flint Community Schools, is they were just punishing and pushing out. So their suspension and expulsion rate actually went from 2.56% before the water crisis to 13% during the water crisis. So that to us really indicated that we had to get in there and educate the state and the special education people, and just not really necessarily educate, but, well, yeah, like this is what lead does. We just needed everybody to believe the families and what was happening to the families. And that has been a sacred trust that's been given us to the people in the community, that they come and say, my child did know his multiplication tables and now he's lost it. Could that be because of the lead? And actually memory loss is something that can be impacted by it. So by getting a neuropsych center established, we're able to really identify where the kids are struggling, but also what their strengths are, because lead can impact one area of the brain, but keep another area completely intact. So a kid could really be struggling in learning how to read, but it's actually an auditory processing disorder that the child has and not a low IQ. So there's just all of these different ripple effects that happen. And when lead was found in Washington, D.C., I think that was 2004, the CDC at the time said lead doesn't do any harm to kids, so it's fine. And there was no lawsuit that came out of it. Mark Edwards could not tie the blood lead levels to the water. And that's where Dr. Mona and Elin Batanzo were able to make that connection here that really caused things to take off in Melissa Mays and fighting and being able to raise awareness of the families and giving their voice to the concerns. And the sad part is it's a continual battle. Like you would think because of what happened in Flint, everybody's had an awareness now and we're all working together to coordinate and move forward, but still there's a lot of resistance and a lot of pushback as to the extent of damage that came, because it cost a lot of money to fix what the government did. Our case continues. We're still working on settlement negotiations for the final phase, where we hope to get a fund out of the larger settlement that can go towards the special education needs. Because now that we've identified that the kids have these needs, we need to make sure that the services get put into place in the schools. So I think I'm at 5 minutes, so I'll take a pause and see if anybody has any questions or concerns. And thanks so much for letting me jump in.
So first of all, wow, it's so inspiring to have the three of you with us, Michael, Melissa, and Kristen, and the work that you've done with this awful problem. So maybe let's give them a little appreciation before we go on. Yeah, and yeah, let's throw it open for questions. And I'd say just chime in.
I have a question for Kristen on how the education work is progressing. I know Dr. Mona had, plans for a center that would really direct actions for the kids that had been exposed to the lead, and I was just wondering how that was progressing.
Great question. So the registry is really what Dr. Mona has been working on to get everybody registered as to what relief they could be entitled to. And some of that relief programmatically is the Neurodevelopmental Center of Excellence, where families can go to get their identification of what their child is struggling with. And unfortunately, with COVID, we got set back a bit as to how many evaluations were actually being done. And, with COVID, you have the Flint Water Crisis, and I feel that the families of Flint, and Melissa, please correct me if I'm wrong, but they were coming, we were moving together in the right direction, and then COVID hit, and it's like, how many traumas can a family take, right? And so it's just been devastating to the community, as Melissa, alluded to, about how the autoimmune systems of the children, the adults, how it's just really impacting families there. COVID is, given what the situation was prior to, because of the Flint Water Crisis. But, with Dr. Mona, I'm trying to make sure that we're in good contact, because she told us this, and this scares my legal team the most, which is once you find what the kids need, the worst thing you could do is not provide them what they need. So that's what continues to keep us entrenched there, to really figure out what is it that they need. And what we're finding is a lot of it is dyslexia, also ADD, ADHD, impulse and behavioral controls. So we need to make sure that the schools are equipped to be able to bring those resources in there. So having board certified behavior analysts to be able to track what the kids are doing and be able to provide meaningful interventions, right? Teach replacement behaviors. Those kind of things are what is required, and that's what we're negotiating for right now as we speak. So hopefully we'll be able to get that to the families and the children there.
Okay, I have a question, Kristen. I'm a speech pathologist from school district just north of Flint. My question is, I know good nutrition helps keep the iron at bay from entering the system. So in terms of grocery stores or ways that more fresh food is being available to the Flint families, and also have they been able to staff the schools with the personnel to help with some of these behavioral issues? Because it's a lot when there's a lot of kids in that situation.
Yeah.
Just wondering how the money,
Yeah, thank you for that question, Carol. So I'll let Melissa touch upon the nutrition, but that is one thing that happened was the state came in with, we're going to provide leafy green vegetables, the Flint Farmers Market, like making sure that there was access to it. Dr. Mona kept talking about deserts, green deserts, so like not being able to get fresh food that way. I mean, teachers were talking to me and saying, yeah, they say that they've got this stuff, but they're still getting sugary donuts and chocolate milk, and how do they expect us to teach after that? And I'm like, very good point. But you're exactly right, Carol, with the needs of the kids. And, for those in the education industry, there's like this triangle approach where you have tiered interventions. You've got tier 1, which is like most kids respond to, right? Like 80%. And then you go up to the next level and it's like, okay, those kids that didn't really respond to that level of intervention for, behavioral expectations for one, then you give them a little bit more support, right? And then tier 3 is when, we might be needing a special education evaluation because they're still not responding to these interventions that we do. What we need to do in Flint is really invert the triangle, because there's a majority of the kids that are needing that tiered level support. And those are what our experts have educated me and our team about. It just takes a lot of money. And to answer your question, Carol, there is not enough staff. There are not enough speech pathologists. There's not enough social workers. The vacancies have been sitting there. Teachers, substitute teachers. I mean, it has been very, very difficult, and it really does go down to resources. And we are one of the worst states in the country as to how we fund our education system, as you well know. And it's really being illustrated within the decimation of the Flint Community School District and the lack of resources there. So
what do you think people can do in Flint or the MEA, or what can be done to highlight this as a particular financial need? I mean, maybe they've talked to the people at the state board. I don't know. Have they?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And one thing that has been done is the Genesee Intermediate School District, there was a lawsuit filed against them as to how they administered their special education funding. And so it was in the county. So one thing that could be done is they're going to have to go back to the table and how do we redraw how much special education money comes in? Because it comes from the feds to the Michigan Department of Education and then to these intermediate school districts that we all have in our county. And then they provide the special education monies to the district. Well, they were giving such a small percentage, and they were basing it upon the number of students rather than the number of special education students, which the court found was fundamentally unfair. So thankfully, there was a lawsuit that was brought about that. But if you are in Genesee County and you have a superintendent that's going to be going to the table and negotiating those rates, say, let it be a weighted funding formula that goes more towards the kids that actually need it, which is the special education population.
I have a question for you activists and lawyers. Does Sierra Club put a lot of effort into get Governor Whitmer elected and Attorney General Nessel? Have they made a difference for you all on the ground and in the courts?
I'm going to say no. And I helped push for Governor Whitmer. I was not a fan of the Attorney General because several months before the election, rumor kind of leaked out that she was going to replace the special prosecution team because they had been appointed by a Republican, which of course we didn't care because he was getting the job done. Todd Flood and Noah Hall and their team were getting the jobs done and actually holding people's feet to the fire, and they were getting ready to go to trial for manslaughter, which was fantastic. Unfortunately, out of the blue, before a hearing, a very important hearing, the Attorney General decided to drop the charges. I found out when a New York Times reporter called me, the families people who have died, and Todd Flood, the special prosecutor at the time, had found out that it wasn't 12 to 14 people who had died from Legionnaires. There were hundreds of people that during that same time period had died from bacterial pneumonia. It's just the doctors didn't know to test for Legionnaires because the, county, city, state, everybody was covering it up and doctors didn't know to test for it. So, there was a lot of people. So there's hundreds of people who died during that same 18-month time period from bacterial pneumonia, and their families will never know. Well, they found out on Facebook that the charges were dropped. We weren't allowed to ask questions. They didn't talk to us for 3 weeks, and then her team came and basically gave us no answers, no reasons for it. They said they just didn't want to work with somebody else's, documentation and cases. So, then there was like almost 2 years went by with nothing, and then now there's these new charges. So it's been very traumatizing because, part of justice, what it means to Flint is, one, that we're safe in our own homes and that what was done to us is fixed by the people who did it, but then also that it's actually a crime to poison Flint residents because we wear the shirts that say Flint Lives Matter, but it's hard to believe it some days when, if I poisoned one person that I would go to prison, and these people poisoned over 100,000 and people are dead, and there's nobody sitting in jail. So, and then looking at the fact that Governor Snyder, who was in charge, he appointed himself the unilateral dictator, in charge and, suspended all of our local democracy. He's only getting slapped with a misdemeanor. It's horrific. So I will tell you right now, here in Flint, the feelings towards Attorney General Nesrall are not good. She's not met with Flint residents. We aren't involved like we had been with the previous team, and we don't know what's going on. So they're doing that talking over us. They're talking about us without us, which is something that's what caused this whole crisis to begin with, all these decisions being made about us, and we have no say over the matter. And then with Governor Whitmer, she's done really great with COVID. She's pushed really hard about the water shutoffs. But she had promised to reopen the water points of distribution sites where people could pick up bottled water, and that never happened. There was no more funding being given towards it. So there's been a lot of disappointment, but we don't feel like she's completely dropped the ball on us or given up on us. Obviously we know that there's the same legislature that's in the state, so you're up against that. But she has pushed hard to settle the class action, so at least make some movement towards it, even if it's not enough. She's worked really hard to get this pushed forward so we could find some kind of justice and people can get a little bit of money to maybe put filtration systems in their home. So the people in Flint are much more warm towards, Governor Whitmer than we are towards Attorney General Nesrall, but that's just because of the mess that the criminal charges have come out to be.
Thanks. Do either of the attorneys want to chime in on that?
I would just say what she said. It's difficult. I'll just be honest. I have a conflict because my husband works for the governor, so I can't say anything negative. But Melissa articulated it so beautifully, which is, there is a lot of suspicion. There's a lot of trust that when you come to work with the families in Flint, they're going to look at you very skeptically because are you there to help or are you there to hurt? And if you're not there to listen and to walk with them in this tragedy and be able to have empathy and understanding, they're not going to be received well by, President Obama, when he came in and drank the water, he's like, no, I want a cup of water. And the water wasn't ready. It wasn't ready to be drank by the community, and that really caused him to take some heat there. And there's just a whole level of trust is completely understandable where there's going to be suspicion, and you have to build that trust. And yeah.
What we're learning about environmental justice, our group is, through different presentations that we've had. And what would be one one thing. If a person in the Huron Valley group down here in Washtenaw County and the surrounding counties wanted to be helpful to our brothers and sisters in Flint, what would we do?
I would say when you're having conversations like this, involve us, reach out to us. There are a lot of groups that are so educated. And the reason why Flint has not gone down with anything but tons of fighting and haven't gone down yet is because we come from a legacy of fighting for human rights, for civil rights, housing rights, so we're a city of fighters. So we've got a lot of amazing elders and activists. I mean, that's the life here. I'm relatively new to it. I've only been in it for 6 years. So we have people that have been fighting, like Neera Sharif and Claire McClinton, who you saw in the video, who have been fighting these injustices for a very, very long time. Getting people involved. We don't like being talked about or pitied. I mean, that's something that we don't like, but we are happy to help because, again, as much as we want to be fixed here, the last thing we want is for this to be replicated to anybody else. But we have this great fear that it's going to, because it already is in some areas. We've been trying to help in Newark as much as possible, and just trying to use, like, we're happy to help, especially if we feel like we're not able to help ourselves at times because we are so up against it. It actually makes us feel a little bit better if we can help where you're at. And then, of course, uniting together. We did a women's march starting down in Auburn Hills and uniting multiple counties. We actually did a cruise. So then we all met and talked about our similar yet slightly different issues. So uniting these issues so we're not siloed. And I think that that's something that's important too. And then, of course, hearing from people who are actually involved and who've been in it can help you learn how to make sure you don't fall into it, or at least watch the warning signs. But then also you might have expertise and resources that can help us, because we're also kind of tired here. So we're happy to learn, any kind of new methods, ideas, legislation coming up. So just basically not forgetting about us and not leaving us out here alone to do this alone, because it seems like it's such a massive problem. But we welcome people who are good folks that aren't going to, use us or that, find some kind of way to, what's the right word I'm thinking of? Harm, don't cause harm. But we're happy to unite, and we are we're in many different coalitions to help try to fight this, because this is a national issue. It's not just happening to us. And, the environmental race, it took them how many decades to declare environmental racism, with the burning plants up here in Flint. So it's a long battle, but we're all in this together. So the more of us that unite, the stronger we're going to be.
Yeah, and I would just add to that is
a practical suggestion for the Sierra Club, this chapter, things that they can do?
So I was just going to mention a practical thing that could be done is the Neurodevelopmental Center of Excellence. Like, if people such as Carol, you have an expertise in a certain area, like you could help with the evaluations. Like, there could be like, what do you need from us? There could be a role to play there, but also we're looking at legislation called Filter First, which is being rewritten. Didn't go very far in the last legislature, so we're just getting it rewritten, and glad to report that Governor Whitmer put $50 million in her budget, the proposed budget that'll be going before the legislature, for Filter First. So that's putting a barrier between the children and lead in their hydration stations in schools. So making sure that, you hear about test and tell. We learned enough from Flint and the aging infrastructure that lead is in the drinking water in schools, because we have such old school buildings. So that's why we want to have hydration stations installed with state-of-the-art filters that will put a protective barrier there. And so we need to get that on a statewide level rather than just a district who has some funds and is able to afford to do that. We really need to build that momentum about doing that. So I'd be happy to send out that legislation to you all, so you know the numbers.
That's a really good suggestion. We go to lobby days twice a year with the legislature, so maybe we could get our activists to put that as one of our lobbying points.
Yes, and part of the Sierra Club in NRDC, they're part of the Filter First group here in Michigan. So I'll just make sure that everybody's looped in. for
Well,
Lobby
yeah,
Day.
HVG leadership. Let's make sure to work on Christy and Tim to move that up as one of our priorities for Lobby Day.
Yeah, so that's legislation that's being considered right now. Is that what you said, or how would that be lobbied for?
It's going to be introduced. It
Okay.
has been introduced once before, and there were some tweaks, so we had to rewrite part of it, and so now it will be reintroduced. But the funding's already there for it in Governor Whitmer's new budget proposal.
Okay, and then just one more comment is that, there's a lot of retired teachers out there. I just have never heard of any call for teachers, call for helpers. I haven't heard that, and there's a lot of super, teachers that would love to have a small classroom of kids that have been, damaged, that they could maybe step back in and help, because these classrooms, you have to reduce the size of kids when they're that involved.
Yeah.
So just a thought. There's all kinds of surrounding schools, districts, and the Flint School District as well. So
yeah, that's a great idea,
thought
Carol.
for
And I know
money.
that those
Yeah.
retired school teachers get together, I think, monthly to have a lunch or something. My mother-in-law is one of them. So like just being able to put a call out to that group. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Is there
I had a
maybe
question.
one more question to get out?
But I was wondering when Flint's water will be switched back to Huron, somehow be coming from Lake Huron instead of the Flint River.
That was forced. We actually forced Governor Snyder to do that in October of 2015. The problem is that the 18 months or so that the Flint River had been run through the pipes, it took about 14 years off of our infrastructure life. So basically right now you could send the most perfect water on earth through it, but the pipes are crumbling and contaminated and damaged. The same thing with our interior pipes and appliances in our homes. So they hoped, we all had hope what's that?
No, never mind. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So, our hope had been if we switched back to Detroit, that things would be better. But unfortunately, the damage was already done to the physical pipes. So actually, the solution to the Flint water crisis is really simple. It's, and the plumbers had gotten together and we had demanded to be a federal disaster so we could have the Army Corps of Engineers come in and just replace the pipes. Just replace the pipes in our homes, in the streets, and leading up to the streets. The service lines, replace all of the damaged plumbing, and then we could have safe water in our homes. So that's a huge step, but an easy fix. And yet they have made it entirely too complicated because, quote unquote, Flint is not a city that we want to go out on a limb for. So.
Who doesn't want to go out on a limb for?
That was actually the federal government had stated that, and then it echoed through the state government. So we had actually Lee Chatfield and Mike Shirkey himself had stated that if we fix Flint's pipes, which isn't our responsibility, then we have to fix everybody who has poison water's pipes. Which you'd think would be common sense, but that's some of the things we've been told to our faces during hearings.
Wow.
Melissa, do you have any hope that the new EPA will be more helpful, the people of Flint and environmental causes in general? I'm thinking specifically that the lead attorney in our case, Dimple Chowdhury, has just been swept up into the EPA, and more environmentalists are flocking back. So I don't know if you're hopeful at all about that.
I don't have hope for much because it seems to be pretty dangerous to just hold your fingers and hope. But it makes me happy to know that people like Dimple are getting in there. And there are people that are on our side that believe the same thing as us, that we can push and they can help us push. So we can push from the outside and the inside. That I look forward to doing because, again, sitting back and just hoping that, things are getting taken care of, that's not worked out for us at all. So, but getting in there and pushing and fighting, I feel like it's going to be a lot easier without the orange wall in the way to actually force things to happen for the better of humanity, basically, so we don't have any more Flint. So I think that there is a lot. And also I pointed out to, that somebody thought it was a good idea to loop me in with Biden's environmental council, which is fine. And so, I was like, you were vice president when this whole thing kicked off and started. So, you can't build back better without rebuilding Flint, so hopefully we've got some leeway in there. And again, with the shifting of the Senate and all that, I mean, it's very, very possible because, I mean, we had it to where Senator Mike Lee from Utah, he single-handedly blocked $260 million to Flint early on. So we have our targets, and now that they're not the majority, hopefully, if you want to say hope, we're definitely going to be able to push harder and farther. And again, the EPA is on the line to settle. And again, looking at the good relationship that the Biden team has with our governor, it's very, very possible we might actually be seeing some justice without us having to wait another 6 years. So things are looking good. I'm not going to hold my breath, and I'm not going to stop fighting and just kind of sitting back hoping. But, I mean, you're right. We are very, very lucky that Dimple called me when they offered this to her, and I told her, I was like, beat them up from the inside. Let's do this. I'm very proud of her, and I want to see more good people getting in and fixing things from the inside so we can help them from the outside as well.
Wow. Well, folks, thank you for coming. To our presenters, thank you so much. What a presentation we got tonight, and bless you for what you do and for the fight that you've been carrying on for these kids and other people in Flint. And good luck. Oh my gosh, Melissa, I hope you have so much better of a year this year, health-wise, and your family. And let's just please give our presenters another round of appreciation. And this was recorded, and it'll be up on our website after our next program next month. And please come back for our next program next month, which is Backyard Birds. We've been kind of alternating between presentations like this one that are very hard hitting and kind of hit you in the gut, and then more low key nature oriented presentations. We'll probably keep that up. Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Take care. Yeah. We'll see you next month, I hope. So long, folks.
Thank you.